And we're live. Hello and
All
welcome
right.
to We Had Movies. And I'm here with my friend Eric Leon and myself, Mo Yagi. I guess I could let him introduce himself as well. So go ahead.
My name's Eric. I'm from Mexico. I have lived here my entire life here in Canada, so I'm pretty much a Canadian through and through. But yeah, I'm excited to do this podcast with my longtime friend Mo about the movies
Yeah.
that we used to watch.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And the same thing. I mean, first generation Canadian as well. Like I was born and raised in London, Ontario, here in southwestern Ontario. But yeah, basically a Canadian through and through, but really my background is Lebanese instead. So instead of being Mexican, I'm from the other brown people. Like to say. Yeah. So yeah. So there you go. So that's a little bit about us. What else would you like to share? I mean, let's see. Like, do you know?
Well, yeah, I mean, when I'm not working 9 to 5, I mean, we do very similar work. I'd like to enjoy playing video games, catching up on TV shows,
Yeah.
hanging out with the dog, and like a little bit of reading. I like a little bit of everything. I mean, obviously, music as well is a big part of my life. Yeah, I mean, you know that Mo, we like to share music every now and then. So yeah,
Yeah, exactly. And like a big part of our careers have always been geared towards customer service and like similar backgrounds and that sort of aspect is just like helping customers out. And so because of that, we figured, hey, why not we start a podcast as well, right? And just like talk about
exactly.
our day to day and our thoughts about films that we grew up with. So films that we had when we were children that had kind of raised us in a way and in a way gave us certain ideas about what it is to be in a family in some ways and different little aspects like that. So we're going to definitely get into that later on. And yeah, other things, I don't know what else could I say. I mean,
I
my
mean,
favorite.
definitely can't forget the nostalgia aspect. I mean, there's something to be said about watching movies you watched as a kid once you're an adult. I mean, whether you have kids or not, I think there's definitely something. There's definitely a perspective that you can get from watching those movies when you were a kid. I mean, I can definitely say that I've picked up on a few things already with the first couple of movies that we're going to be going through. So, I
Yeah,
mean,
and
I'm excited to share with everybody.
yeah, that's really going to be exciting too to share that. Yeah, so I'm with you on that. So yeah, let's get into it kind of. Yeah, so we'd like to start with like a first kind of section, a first segment. This time we're going to call it what you eating, and what you eating is a segment about what sort of food should you eat or prepare when you're watching this film. Let's say you're going to sit down with your kids or sit down with your loved one or friends or family or whoever, and you're just going to share a meal while watching this film. I mean, it's not really out of the ordinary these days, right? I mean, do people still
Not at all.
share
No, of course.
share
I mean,
meals with family? I don't even know if that happens anymore. But
well, I think it's 50-50 on that. But yeah, I
yeah,
think it's definitely sharing snack meal when you're watching a movie. I mean, it makes it a full experience, right?
right,
Um,
exactly.
so,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, in Ninja Turtles being our first movie, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the 1990 version,
Hmm.
I think a natural snack slash meal for that would be pizza, right? I mean, we're talking about Ninja Turtles here, so pizza is definitely something that should not be ignored as far as a snack goes for this
Right.
movie.
And that's kind of something that we forgot to mention earlier on is that, yeah, the first film that we want to talk about really is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So the 1990 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. And so right away when Eric said pizza, and right away you had an idea, right? Like you knew that that was coming. It was going to be the Ninja Turtles because what else? What
Oh,
other
of
'90s
course.
film? And I mean, we're going to stick with the '90s for now. So like, what other '90s film would you have watched that really influenced you to have a pizza party? I mean, let's be honest. There, how many kids probably had a pizza party involving the
I mean, I
Ninja
guess
Turtles movie.
growing up, it was pretty normal to get invited to a friend's house for a birthday party and
Yeah,
pizza. Obviously, the
pizza's there.
natural selection
Hmm.
because I mean, all kids like pizza, right? It's easy. I mean,
It's
oh, you're looking
true.
at it as an adult. I mean, you can easily distract kids with pizza in a movie. That's a two
Yes,
hours that you can get their undivided attention on those two things, right? So
absolutely.
definitely a staple when you're growing up. You know, whether
Yeah,
it's here in Canada, anywhere really, pizza in a movie.
absolutely. And like, what would be your preferred pizza? Like, if you were gonna eat one with,
So, I mean, as a kid, you know, as a kid, you've got very simple tastes. So I think, I mean, as a kid, I would definitely reach for a pepperoni pizza or maybe even just a cheese pizza, right? But now as an adult, I do like other flavors. So I uh, I don't mind mine with with some veggies on there, you know, some mushrooms, green
yeah,
peppers. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
nice
Um,
veggie pizza.
and
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, some meats on there too, maybe some sausage or some pepperoni. I mean, it really doesn't matter. I mean, I'm
yeah.
pretty open when it comes to that, but
What do you have something you
definitely
wouldn't have on a pizza?
anchovies.
And
Anchovies, definitely.
definitely no.
Definitely, it's not a that is not
That's funny.
an
So,
ingredient that agrees with me.
so you would say you're more of a Michelangelo than as a Ninja Turtle because you definitely don't want
I think so.
anchovies. Yeah.
Definitely, Mikey.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I can see that. Yeah. But yeah, I definitely, definitely. But what I was gonna say is, yeah, my favorite pizza was definitely gonna be the um, green olives and pineapple and chicken. And if you put like garlic sauce as the base too, that's a very good pizza.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
That
that's
sounds like something the turtles would approve of.
I hope so. I think that the turtles would eat. I mean, it's kind of weird that they don't eat anchovies, right? Like, because you'd think that turtles would love fish, and especially like
You'd
salty
think so.
fish.
You'd think so. Yeah.
Yeah, so it is kind of weird that that's not maybe like do you remember if in the cartoon they ate with like they had the little anchovies on
I
the
actually think
pizza?
they did. I'm pretty sure they did.
I think
Um,
they I think they did in the and I think in the movie they just made it that Michelangelo says no anchovies because that's like a funny thing to say at the time
exactly. I mean, it
over the
adds a bit of a
telephone.
comedic element to the
Yeah,
movie, right? Because I mean,
right.
you find more people that don't like anchovies versus the people that do like anchovies. So it's kind of like a, you know, like a general statement to make about people's likes and dislikes. And again,
Exactly.
you know, like you said, it's a catchy phrase for the movie, right?
Exactly. And like it's kind of funny that thinking about like catchy phrases that people would say over the phone and we remember that from films because I don't even think kids know what over the phone is anymore. I'm just kidding. But,
No, man,
like there's like
you're
a
not wrong. I mean,
millennial, there's
unless over
like a
the phone,
generation, right? Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, well, yeah, you're right. I mean, unless over the phone means, you know, using a texting app or something like that. Yeah, I don't think having conversations over the phone, over the actual phone, telephone that is,
Yeah.
um, exist as much as they used to.
No,
I
I
think
don't
the
think
kids
so.
nowadays are doing voice notes, not actually calling each other, but leaving voice
Yeah,
notes
I
for each
can't
other.
imagine anybody calling Uber Eats anymore. I don't think that's a thing. I feel like everybody just likes to use the app. The app is easier. And, shout out to
I
Uber
mean,
Eats. Hopefully
I
they
mean, imagine
send us
the
some money. No,
turtles
I'm just kidding.
calling for a pizza now.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. And I mean, at the end of the day, I think I would prefer the way things are now anyway, the way we order pizza now. So to be honest, the way Mikey had to do it over the telephone, calling for pizza. Like that was such a dated thing. I almost like cringe now having to call a place to order food, like because
You know what? I feel like there's a higher margin for error. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean,
yeah.
everybody makes mistakes, but like if you're ordering on a night where there's lots of people that order pizza, I mean, Friday night or Saturday night's a pretty traditional pizza night, right? So
Exactly.
you call in for a night like that, and I feel like the margin for error is a lot greater if you're calling in to order pizza, right? Versus an app where you're picking the ingredients from a pick list, right? I mean, it's kind of hard to for that to screw up unless the app is messed up too, right? So less margin for error is what I'm saying nowadays.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we've talked enough about like, what kind of food we eat. I think we can move on to the next segment of our show, which this part of the show is more of just a summary of the film that we actually we're talking about here. So just for everybody out there who's never actually watched the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 1990 film, we're just going to do our own little summary version, and this is what we call the book report segment. So in this segment, I'm just going to start off by giving my little summary, and then Eric will, give his summary and say if there's anything he wants to add or anything that he thinks that I didn't mention, he can mention as well. So there we go. Okay. So, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. This was my favorite movie as a 10-year-old child, and I would say that this is how I would exactly describe this film.
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, I would start off by saying, awesome movie, super cool, cowabunga. This is the best film ever. I like how I didn't see them in the tunnels before the movie started, and then they showed up with the letters. That was really cool. And then I also noticed that I really thought Splinter was kind of scary looking, even though he was supposed to be nice. Um, I noticed that the beginning of this film was really just about more or less about gangs happening in a big city, and there's just a lot of bad people, and I don't know why they're there, but I know there's a lot of bad people, and I think they're run by something, and I think it's the Foot, and the Shredder is the leader of the Foot, and he Splinter tells us a story at one point about how he's connected to Shredder, but I don't actually remember as a kid. I don't remember that plot as well as I remember it now, which is kind of interesting. So I definitely would have said something more like, "Hmm, the Shredder really doesn't like rats." And I think that's how I would have probably seen it, or he just doesn't like these mutants because I don't think I remember the levels, the level of the differences in the storyline. And then I didn't really pay much attention to like the bad guys or the little kids as being bad guys. I really thought of them as just being like side characters, and I didn't really pay too much attention to them as well when I was younger. So I remember that as well.
Mhm.
So at the end of the day, I think what I really, really focused on was Ninja Turtles. My favorite one was Donatello, and I think it's because he was like quieter and I was quieter as a kid, and but he only like had like his little sense of humor to himself kind of thing. And he was also like really into science and stuff, which I thought at the time that's how I was. Like I was really into science. and stuff when I was a kid. So, yeah, so that's my little summary of that film, and I think that's how I would have seen it as a 10-year-old version of me. Donatello is my favorite.
That's a good pick.
Yeah,
Okay, so let me jump into mine. So uh, let me start off by saying Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the coolest movie ever. So I'm just going to summarize as if, for like I said, if I were a kid, about four really cool turtles who are also ninjas. Then they're named after really famous artists. You know, Leonardo, Donatello, Michelangelo, Raphael. And they live in a sewer in the streets in New York City with their master, who's a rat named Splinter. And they love eating pizza, which I think everybody can get behind. If there's anything that you can definitely uh, feel is, everybody likes pizza. So at the very least, you've got that going
yeah,
with them. So these turtles, what do? They fight bad guys, especially the growing menace that you see in the background of this movie, which is the Foot Clan. You know, this street gang that's led by this guy named Shredder. Right now, the turtles, I haven't really run into them that much. It's more of just like a burgeoning crime spree, right? So what they're doing, they're just fighting bad guys until they meet the reporter, April O'Neil, who the turtles help and she helps them. You know, there's kind of like a mutually beneficial relationship here, right? But then they also run into Casey Jones, who's another human that Raphael kind of interacts with first and develops a kind of relationship with Casey Jones, if you could say that. Um, he's a tough guy, fights with sports equipment, which I think is really, really novel idea for this character. And they're kind of both him and April are kind of seen as like the human friends of the turtles. You know, their connection to the outside world. Um, and quite frankly, they make it a fantastic team, all of them. The movie is just so exciting with all the action scenes, with the comedic one-liners that the turtles give, especially Michelangelo, who happens to be my favorite character. Um, it's also serious. I mean, they crack jokes, they tease each other the way brothers do, but at the same time, they talk about friendship and about doing the right thing, which is, I think, something that you know oftentimes, as a kid, you kind of do reflect on, uh,
yeah, for
especially your
sure.
friendships as a kid.
Hmm. I
At
think
the
you,
For
I think
me,
you did a lot
yeah, go
more
ahead.
reflecting than I did, to be honest. But yeah, keep going.
No, for me, this was, and I'll touch on some of these subjects later on, but for me, this is a great movie to start off with because I was a big fan of the cartoon show when I was a kid, and I mean, I went all in, right? I had the Ninja Turtle action figures. I had so many of those things, and for me, watching this movie was kind of like revisiting that part in my childhood, and for me, it was a great time. It was simpler time, um, but definitely something that I've been able to revisit and really enjoy from a different perspective.
Yeah, because I'm even
And I
thinking
mean, who
about.
doesn't?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about how, like, even like, I'm saying I was 10 years old, but I probably would have been around 6 years old when I saw this film. So when I'm summarizing it, like, I'm thinking about like really to the T. But you're right. There's so much more aspect to this film than what I remember from when I was a child. But I used to memorize the lines, which was really interesting. Like, so
Oh
like
yeah, for sure. You remember the one-liners, right?
Yeah, the one-liners exactly. But well, man, I
There's
love being a turtle is just like an epic one-liner that you can
right.
never,
Oh, I mean,
yeah,
Cowabunga, Radical. I mean, they all had their. I mean, I don't know if it was like if that was a product of the Bart Simpsons era or if Bart Simpson was a product of the Ninja Turtles era. You know what I mean? Like, what
right.
came first? Was it the Ninja Turtles using these catchphrases, or was it Bart Simpson first? I don't know, but I mean, look where we are now. These are established catchphrases that you can
Yeah,
basically attribute to either one of these, and yeah, it's incredible what a single catch word. I mean, let's not even discuss a catchphrase. This is the catch word. Um, the kind of like impact that can have, right?
exactly. So yeah, so since we're getting into it, we're going to get into the next segment here. So we've kind of summarized the film for you. So like, again in a nutshell, it's a Ninja Turtle movie. The Ninja Turtles beat April O'Neil for the first time. It's an origin story, and then they meet their friend Casey Jones, which is kind of interesting that they introduced him into the story so early on. Um, I think that's kind of funny because like Casey Jones is very much a side character, but I think they needed somebody to be like the love interest for April O'Neil because it couldn't be the Mutant Ninja Turtles.
I mean, yeah,
I
absolutely. And
mean,
I think also
a part of it is they're
the
teenagers, so the other
yeah,
part of it is they're
exactly.
teenagers.
It also serves as a kind of rivalry for, I mean, specifically Raphael. If you look at the first interaction,
Yeah,
the first scene that we see Casey Jones in, he's trying to take care of some thugs that are trying to steal a woman's purse, and then
yeah,
Raphael kind of injects himself into the situation, and here you have two guys on the same side of the law that basically fight each other because they're the ones they want to dispense their own version of justice,
exactly.
and then they end up, you know, kicking each other's asses, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, like the whole fight scene between Raphael and Casey Jones was really interesting too. Because
It's still
like,
one of my favorite parts of the movie.
yeah, I mean, there's that scene too where because that the actor is Canadian, right? So he ends up saying, what was it?
I think it's a hockey
Some like,
reference.
yeah, something to do with like, oh yeah, what are you, Wayne Gretzky on steroids? Is what Raphael calls, right? So that's kind of funny. I mean, he could have picked a different. I guess when you're thinking hockey, it's got to be a Canadian player anyway. Like I wouldn't think them thinking of an American. Like what are you, Brett
Well, and
Hull? Like
again,
like I would.
you got to put things into the context of the time, right? Like, who
Yeah,
was your standout hockey player? I mean, I don't even think hockey was that popular back then in generally speaking. So, I mean, if you are going to make a reference like that, it's got to be something pretty relevant, someone that's really stands out. And I think that the player at that time was Wayne Gretzky. Always
yeah,
has been.
yeah, yeah. It's true. You can't deny the fact that Gretzky's always been one of the greatest players. Yeah. But I mean, again, it depends on the time. All these greats, it always depends on the time that they played
For
in, right?
sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, there is something very like off edge about every single one of these sports players when they get into these
Hmm.
competitions. So yeah, you definitely have to put aside a lot of feelings and a lot of things to be the best, to become the greatest. I think a lot of anxiety that you have
Yeah,
to put aside.
absolutely.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that being said, so our next segment here is upon further reflection. So what we're going to be talking about is just more about what this film means to us now. And so, kind of, we already kind of started touching on that, but um, as children, we definitely don't remember or recall the depths of the story and the way that it goes. So, like now, I'm looking at it and I'm like, man, that scene where all the turtles, brothers, are sitting in a circle around the fire and they're tearing up, because they're talking to their dad. And I mean, this is
The
the funny,
meditation scene.
the
Yeah.
meditation scene. It tears me up. It still gets me a little bit,
And like I said, even though the movie it's an action packed fun movie, it has these serious moments that again uh it
Yeah,
really kind of brings out the softer side of the turtles. Yeah, they're
it's
teenage clowns, if you will, but at the same time, they still have, as teenagers, they have complex feelings and emotions, and I mean that could definitely be said by Raphael. If you look at him throughout the entire movie, you see how conflicted he is. From losing his weapon when he helped save April O'Neil and insisting that he can get it back. Even though his master told him to just let it go. It's one of those things that as a teenager, you do have a hard time letting go of things, either
letting
even if it
go.
is something
That's
as
true.
superficial of as his weapon. He could just as easily get another one, but why is it so important that he does that? I think he recognizes that he screwed up. He shouldn't have left that there, but it's definitely something that he struggles with himself.
Yeah.
And you see him struggle throughout the movie at various times. And again, I think that it kind of speaks to the complexity of who these characters actually are. They're more human than animal, and I think it's really easy to forget that when when you look at their costumes, right? They're so the costumes are just so on point. They look like real life versions of the cartoon characters.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
that, you have a hard time not looking at them as turtles, but at the same time, they do exhibit these complex thoughts and feelings, right?
So yeah, and talking about like their complex feelings and emotions, you can also kind of also point out the interesting dilemmas, and the major theme of this story in general is like family, right? The family is like a huge theme in this whole movie. One
Hmm.
thing I've noticed is uh, when you talk about like the brothers, the four brothers. We don't know necessarily if they're all related either, but you have this like Master Splinter, who is a rat, by the way, who could have easily, when they were small, eaten those turtles because he's a rat, and he could have had the delicious meal, and that would have been a completely different story. Of course, I don't know. It would have been fun to watch. uh, Maybe somebody can make a version where it's just like Splinter with like shells on his elbows and stuff from when he ate the little Ninja Turtles, and he's just like this like evil version. I don't know, evil Splinter, we'll call him. But yeah, no, I think what would have been interesting is just what was interesting about this movie in general is just like the themes of like how, yeah, you have this father who's not related at all to these four turtles, and we don't really know if necessarily they came from the same place, because they all come into a shop, probably shop turtles. They probably fell in the sewer. I
Yeah,
think that's where the story goes. Usually in New York, people drop their turtles down the sewer and then they grow really big. And I think
exactly. Yeah,
there's like that whole fairy tale. Yeah, so that's the idea. So these are like pet turtles that all just happen to be at the right place at the right time and have this nice stepdad take in all these turtles and foster them. Really, he's a foster dad, if anything. And the four brothers are kind of like the story Four Brothers, uh, which was interesting. And you have four Ninja Turtles who, well, four turtles who happen to be teenagers now because they're growing anamorphically as the same as human beings. So they're growing with the same dynamic as human beings, like we were talking about earlier, with the same emotions as human beings. So now they're also growing with the same sort of games and values as families would grow together, right? Growing up together. And we get to see those games where
right, right.
you have like the two youngest brothers kind of get along really well, like Donatello and Michelangelo get along really well. They joke around and they point fingers at their older brother, Raphael. Raphael is kind of like the angsty teenage brother who doesn't really,
Exactly.
right? And then you have Leonardo, who's just kind of like this, kind of like, I guess the leader, but he only
Yeah,
puts himself.
he's
He's self applied himself. He makes himself. He puts more work on himself than he needs to. Let's say Leonardo really wants to be the leader. He's self-appointed leader, but
yeah.
Raphael kind of lets each teenage boy kind of grow up in their own way, and so because Leonardo wants to play the role of the leader, he becomes the leader, and that's just how it is, right? The dynamic. So it's really interesting.
Exactly.
And the other fun family stuff was also the stuff where like April O'Neil also, you know, she's got this somewhat like giving or nurturing, I mean, obviously she comes from wealth, because who can just have their place burned down and go, oh no, I'll just go to this other house that my dad owned. um
Go to that the country house, right?
yeah. But I mean, hey, at least she has that, which is great. But the other nice thing is that she was just willing to like rescue these, outlaw teenagers from the streets, right? Like, so if you think about it, like if they weren't
Hmm.
turtles and they weren't mutants, which is probably the weirder part of the whole story, the actual thing that would have been impeding people from having these people in their houses is they're just these teenage kids, these ruffians that are just living in the streets, and you're just kind of like welcoming them into your house. But I think the thing is that's nice about it is just showing you that, yeah, you can have family in very different ways, very different dynamics of family.
Absolutely. And I mean,
Yeah.
alternately, we've got the case of April O'Neil's boss and the dynamic that he has with his son Danny. You know, he's rebelling against his dad. I mean, we see early on that he steals money from his dad's wallet. Then we see him actually, join the Foot Clan, which, is that a full transformation from regular kid to uh, the street thug, basically. And it's interesting seeing that kid's evolution throughout the entire movie, because he does go from conflicted teenager, trying to figure things out, to figuring things out. It is interesting that that kind of comes after a little bit of guidance from Splinter. He finds him when Splinter's been captured, and isn't afraid to approach him and kind of see what the deal is. And I think it's that willingness to take on like a different father figure, a different mentor, other than his own dad, is interesting, because I mean it I think it shows that it's not that he's unwilling to listen, he just wants to listen to somebody else, or needs somebody
Right.
else to tell him
You
certain
actually bring up a
things,
good point
right?
too, right? Like, because you're saying it's like almost like saying like your father isn't always the greatest mentor, right? Like, even though
Exactly,
that seems to be the case, it's like no, he needed to meet Master Splinter for him to realize
exactly.
that
He needed to
there's just
hear
some
those
things
things from
he can't
somebody else,
accept,
right?
right? There's just some things he'll never accept from his father, and his father will never accept from him, and that's just how it's going to be. And so he needed to see that from the eyes of another mature, influence, or peer, we should say. And in this case, it just happened to be Master Splinter, who was a wise rat. I mean, it does show you how intelligent that he must have been to not just instantly like freak out at the sight of a giant rat, and not assume the worst scenario. So there is a level of like curiosity and intelligence in the boy as well, so it's kind of interesting.
And
But yeah.
I think that's it. I think that's it's kind of the thing about being a teenager, right? Where you have that age, you have that curiosity, that it very well could be that same curiosity that enticed him to join the Foot Clan. Like see what that was
Right.
about. I mean, obviously, um,
Right, because he
there's
was seeking
a lot of
mentorship
other factors.
originally from the foot, right?
Exactly.
Right.
You know,
And
you're trying to you're trying to find yourself and figure out who you are, and all of a sudden there's a group of people that says that they can be your family, and I think that that can be enticing for a lot of teenagers.
Yep. Yep. And so at the end of the day, I mean, it does this really good, like version, kind of interesting, like dark, uh, kind of light on New York City, but not really. I mean, it's showing you it's almost like a reflection of the times, because if you're thinking of like 80s New York City, like it wasn't always bright and shiny. It depended where you lived, and there was a
No,
lot of
exactly.
poverty and a lot of, yeah. So it kind of has a little bit of a reflection on what was happening in the world, and even on a reflection on a bigger scale in real world, on bit larger cities over time, what could happen, and how you get those sort of areas where it's just like increased population of crime, increased, generation of like criminals, and sort of that sort of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah. um I mean, would it be surprising if it was a ninja clan? Yes. Okay, that's a little bit much, and um, I think that would be, again, if I saw that in real life, I would have to laugh, even if I was scared. I would just be like, "This can't be. They're actually ninjas," and then die laughing, because obviously ninjas aren't gonna like that I laughed at them. But yeah, but um other than the family stuff, the other major themes um that were really highlighted in this story. Oh, so yeah, other themes that were in the story, of course, were including the romance between April O'Neil and
Casey Jones.
Casey Jones, which I guess they had to bring that into the story at some point. They had to have some sort of love interest for the parents to be engaged. Which, I mean, I'm not going to lie, they were cute together. There was a little bit of uh, almost like, oh, boys will be boys kind of thing going on, where like the
Hmm.
Casey Jones was a little bit too aggressive, and April O'Neil was kind of like, oh, but it was almost like gross, like compared to what we're used to now. But
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of
yeah.
those things where, I mean, looking back on it now through today's lens, it very much is one of those things where you cringe a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, and you still see it now in movies, I feel like, that are trying to get a specific kind of vibe, especially if you're trying to recreate the 80s or early 90s, or even going back further. You're going to take certain liberties with the the language that you use, because of course you want to be somewhat accurate to the time period. So I mean, that isn't the only case. It's a few cases where um there's certain language used in the movie where it kind of gives you pause. Certain jokes, which
I,
again, I think it's a product of its time, but yeah, definitely don't work for today's audiences, I feel like.
a best way of putting it, yeah. So there is definitely, yeah, some very just specifically 90s, like we talked about earlier on, where Michelangelo calls for pizza and says, no anchovies. It's a very popular thing to say in the 90s. Things I mean, interesting fact, what was it, who plays the Donatello character?
That was
This was Corey
Corey
Feldman.
Feldman.
Yeah, so that's
Yeah.
just like a one fun fact, which we could probably get into later on. But Corey Feldman, doing like yo, hey, voiceover is perfect, right? Because that's and I mean, if for those of you who don't know who Corey Feldman is, At the time, he was a teen star, I guess is the best way to put it, right?
Child
Like,
actor, even. I mean, he
yeah,
did Goonies as well.
right. But like, he was just really famous with the girls, right? He was just like a
Yep.
teen favorite. Yeah, teen idol. That's what they called them, teen idols.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, yeah. So love is definitely a major theme in the story as well. And I mean, love and family kind of goes hand to hand. And then the other theme is, of course, like is the darkness, is where does the darkness come from, how does it exist. And I mean, they kind of bring in this, Shredder character who just doesn't care, right? He's the bully, he's the one who gets his way by force.
Mhm.
And getting things by force always gives you negative outcomes. That's just how it's supposed to be in the world of the Ninja Turtles. So he gets his outcome, which is getting crushed in the back of a garbage truck. Somehow doesn't die because I think there's the same ooze in there, but that would be, you would have to watch the sequel to know what happens then. Dun, dun, dun. And then the Shredder comes back.
Spoiling
Um,
it.
but
Is it a
yeah,
spoiler this many years after?
I don't think so. No, I mean, if you want to go ahead and watch the sequels, they're not that bad. The original film is what we're here to talk about, and I think the original film has a lot to hold on its own. And but
Oh,
the
absolutely. Yep.
yeah, but the sequels definitely do continue with the same brothers, which I really enjoyed. Instead of the constantly changing the characters. um, but yeah, I mean, we might as well wrap this up. So just to get to the end of it, the next part of it is we're going to do the talk. So this is where we're just going to kind of give you a little rundown of the pros and cons of the film, and just to kind of finalize and kind of give you an idea of whether or not we think this is appropriate for rewatching. Like, would you enjoy rewatching this film? And I think the main thing is that you're going to enjoy rewatching the film because there's a little bit of nostalgia to it. But I think another part of it, like the music is nostalgic, even like the kind of
Mhm.
the scenery is nostalgic. For those of you who are into retro stuff, for the hipsters out there, that if there are still hipsters that exist, they're gonna want to watch it just to have that sort of nostalgic feeling. And I think you're gonna get that a lot from a lot of the films that we're gonna be talking about in the future to come. But this movie definitely brings out that sort of feeling, the grungy feeling of Nirvana, and the sort of like hip hop vibe that was going on as well. So this kind of like new age space hip hop that was kind of playing in the background, I would say. So yeah, definitely some really really cool stuff. Skateboarding was a really big theme, which was really fun because again, skateboarding was a big deal. Kind of like instead of surfing, which was cooler back in the day when we had the blues. Those are the Beach Boys in the '60s, and they love
Yep.
you love
Yep.
surfing. So then in the '90s, what we had is skateboarding because I mean late '80s, early '90s, right? Skateboarding became a huge
It's
thing.
super popular. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because that's when it was born in that era. And I mean, some of the best, skateboarders are from that time. And so, why not give these turtles? I mean, again, you think turtles, you think they should be on a beach and there should be water involved. But since they're in the sewers of New York, you're not going to get a lot of that,
Right. Why not put
right?
them on skateboards?
So put them on skateboards, and they're going to have to, and the nice thing about skateboards is they can build their own skateboards. They can, like, you know, adjust them however they like. They can do all kinds of fun stuff with that. So yeah, it's really, really interesting in that sense. And so you get a little bit of all this nostalgia. Another fun fact, so a couple of fun facts we'll throw at you. The voice that did Splinter was also the guy who played Elmo for many years on Sesame Street. So yeah, the same guy who got accused of a bunch of underage. Yeah, we're not
Bunch
going
of
to get
things.
into it over this podcast. That's not really what we're here to talk about. But if you're interested in the history of it, that's a fun fact anyway. So yeah. All right. And what else? What other fun facts did you want to add there, Eric?
Let me see here. What kind of fun facts do I have? You already have. We already talked about Corey Feldman,
Mm-hmm.
which I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop seeing him as soon as I heard that. I heard his. I realized it was him. Um, I don't
I
know
think
that I have any other fun facts for.
really.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we already touched on the fact that Jim Henson production did a lot of the stunt doubles and the inside the suits. So it was Jim Henson production guys that were doing the stunt double suits, and that's why the costumes
Right.
also kind of give you that kind of comic-y feeling, more cartoony feeling. Which really, that's the kind of Ninja Turtle that we really enjoy versus, the Ninja Turtles that were in um, uh, well, I don't know if I'd call them Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but again, Michael Bay's version of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which were more like giant monstrosities, beasts, if you would. I mean, yeah, I guess a mutated turtle would look more like that, but it's not fun, right? Like, it's just not a fun
Yeah.
version of the turtles.
Interesting. It's interesting you
It,
bring up the turtles. I do.
yeah,
I do have one fact about the
yeah.
movie. Uh, when when it was originally being made, they had this idea that they were going to make the movie the same way that they made the movie Who Framed Roger Rabbit, where certain elements
We're
were
gonna be
animated,
cartoons.
you know?
Oh,
Exactly. Exactly. But instead they scrapped that idea and they went with the Jim Henson produced puppetry, which I think was ultimately the better way to go. I don't know how I would have felt about watching the animated version, the cartoon version of the Ninja Turtles interacting with the, actors. I think it's very different when you're talking about Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which is some of those are original characters or um, for that movie, not necessarily existing characters from other mediums, right? So it's it the tone would have been very different. I think it would have been kind of a joke, to be perfectly honest with you. If we're talking
yeah.
about, you're seeing
I
the
mean,
cartoon
it
turtles on screen, cartoon Splinter on screen, and then how far do you take that? Do you
it
do
would
you
have
extend that to the
been
Foot Clan
it
as
would have been a
well?
different
Do you
movie.
do
It
that
would have
with the
been a different
Shredder as
movie.
well?
Right? Yeah.
Exactly.
It would have been a different movie. Definitely. I think the grittiness of it, of having those real life actual characters, and even the fact that the Michael Bay ones were really nice looking, for as far as like, what a mutant turtle would look like. And I think that I
Hmm.
think the animation for it was fantastic. I'm not to shoot down the animators who made that. That looks incredible, but just the fact that you're right, like, just even then working with, knowing, when you're watching a film, knowing that somebody's not really talking directly to something, it's actually just like an image, right, that's there. I mean, they do
And now
have
it's just a
people
green
placed in
screen.
those green screen. They do put people in those positions so that they have someone to look at. But again, it's still you still feel that it's green screen, right? Like, you have it's still not quite there yet, right? It's still not perfect. Where it's just there's something you got from animatronics where you can actually still feel like you're right there in the movie. It's like it's there. It's
It-
there with them.
and there's a lot of movies, back from that time period where, it was just on the cusp of doing switching over to, computer effects.
Mm-hmm.
When they were getting good enough that you can replace certain set pieces, you know, like costumes and other animatronics for, computer effects.
Right.
But
And even now, like with the development of AI and the way they're developing robots, wouldn't it be fun to see a film where filmed with a real robot instead of, an animated?
you're not you're I don't think that's too far off. I think eventually
Yeah.
that is something that um people will explore because of the kind of implications that it has, for for money making purposes primarily.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I
How
mean,
much do you have to pay an AI robot, right? That can work for you indefinitely.
that's true. And then they just do all the films for us. Yeah, I mean that would be funny. I mean that puts a whole other perspective into play, right? And so at least there's still humans in the suits, I guess. I don't know. I don't know. Um, but just to say, yeah, this there's something fun. There's something fun about watching this grit, like this movie. It's a gritty version of the Ninja Turtles, which I like, even
Hmm.
though it's meant to be kind of soft and light for kids, which they try their best to do that. But it still has something about it, which I think we grew up with the '90s with movies where it just got a little bit of adult feel to it, just enough to make a 10-year-old think, man, I feel, cool watching this. I feel like,
Well, and I mean there's a lot of action. I mean, a lot of great action movies from the late '80s, early '90s, the mid '90s, and I think that um, on the flip side, you had a lot of good kids movies that veered towards the action adventure, a little bit more family oriented, but still exciting nonetheless. And I think but we grew up on those movies, right? So um I think this is definitely one that falls within that category.
yeah, absolutely. This movie is definitely one that falls within that category. And I think that it's worth giving a watch if you haven't seen it yet. Definitely you want to watch it with your kids, something between the age of 6 and 10. They'll get a real good joy out of watching that again with their family. And I mean, I'm not to say teenage boys or teenage girls or teenage anybody really would be able to enjoy the movies as well. Um,
Hmm.
so it's just a matter of perspective, and how much you're willing to have imagination. And I think that's the greatest thing about these '90s movies is it's still left room for a child's imagination. So even if you're sitting there watching and you're engaged and there is a suspension of disbelief that you're able to let go and just kind of be in the movie in the moment and feel like you're a part of the story. And even you talk about Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I mean, just even if they were cartoons, there was something about the way that the characters related to each other and the way that they relate to the main character, that it was still had those themes of family. It still
Yeah,
had those
and I
things,
mean, how I'm putting it in my head is going to be very different than how something might get put together in a Hollywood studio.
Okay.
A little bit more thought might be put into how that's done. Obviously, I'm piecing it together in my head, thinking, yeah, they're just going to take frames out of the TV show and slap them into a movie. But I mean, obviously, you wouldn't be able to follow the same script that you have now if you did something like that. I think the
It
tone of
would
the movie would definitely change.
would have been different.
Um,
Yeah.
Absolutely, it would have been different, and rightfully so, right? I mean, you the same way you kind of have to change the story if it's all VFX, looking at the Michael Bay versions or even the latest one, Mutant Mayhem, that's animated. And they did Into the Spider Verse, um, which
Mhm.
I have to say was they really did the Ninja Turtles franchise justice by doing that because it it really gives it that comic book feel, but they were able to modernize the story to for a 2024 setting or 2023 rather. I think yeah, it came out last year, but yeah, I think they're able to really bring back the Ninja Turtles for every single generation, and they have done it justice somewhat lately. Not a big fan of the Michael Bay movies. I think there's certain elements in them that were
Yeah, so what I wanted to say about Michael Bay films is that they're kind of not, I don't know. It's not that they're not good. It's just that they're not what I was expecting. So that's all I have to say about those films. Really, I'm sure that somebody enjoyed them for what they were. I mean, they were big action movies, and um, they, I don't know, they had a lot of like weird, cool stuff. Like the Ninja Turtles were bulletproof. I guess that would explain them fighting robots
Mhm.
with machine guns and stuff. But I guess it takes away from the aspect of I guess the aspect of just like the good old brawling days. So there's something maybe more wholesome to teach kids that hey, sometimes if you want to get revenge on somebody, you better just do it with your own physical strength than to
Right.
yeah, to shoot them with a gun or throw a sword at them or whatever. But I don't know, it might just be giving the wrong impression, even though back then I'm pretty sure there was a lot of parents that were saying that the Ninja Turtles movie was probably giving their kids the wrong impression, making them think that fighting was a good thing.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so I don't know. Then Michael Bay maybe has made his version, and then you were saying that the Mayhem one was good though, right?
It was I did enjoy that one. It it was it was updated for for today's audiences, which I thought was fantastic. And I mean um really captured the comic book feel with the animation style that they went with, which
Oh,
I
okay,
thought was really really good. I think it's kind of the reboot that it needs before they're able to really figure out if or the live action situation. I know that there there's been some discussion about doing the the last Ronin and uh, Ninja
right,
Turtles, which would definitely take it into a more darker, more adult tone. Um, but something like that, you need to be careful how you do it because you do want to do the source material justice when
right,
when you're putting together something like that.
yeah, no, exactly. Okay, well, yeah, I mean, that's basically what we have to say about this movie. I mean, what can we give it as a rating? I would say that definitely let your let your kids know that mom and dad want to have a popcorn night, and this is something to watch together with the family. Again, it's a family oriented film. Very much encourages brotherly love. So if you have a lot of young boys, they might be interested in it. What's not compelling about the film? It's very short compared to what we're used to now in movies.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, at an
it's
hour and a half, it's
right. As kids, we
there's
felt
not a
like
whole
it
lot
was
to
a
that,
lot.
right?
Right. As kids, we felt like it was already enough information. But I think for an adult, it might just be, it might feel a little short. Might be feel like there wasn't much of a story. But to be honest, it still has this little bit of a drive that you just kind of want to watch it again just to get that memory, that memory of the brothers, of the Ninja Turtles, of their little goofiness, of April O'Neil, the whole storyline.
Mm.
That's where it's there, it's present, it's still worth watching. And then the original Ninja Turtles, their costumes were just really amazing. So it's really, really worth a rewatch for that, just for that.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I agree. I agree entirely. Even I think those costumes still stand up to today's standards, even with all of the computer effects that you see now. I mean, even comparing them to the Michael Bay versions, they like I said, those costumes still really hold up to the quality that you come to expect out of um the Jim Henson's creature workshop. I mean,
Hmm.
there's they've always come up with quality costumes and animatronics, and I mean, this movie being 30 years old, um, even a little bit more than that, it's definitely, like I said, still holds up to in terms of quality.
In terms of quality, yeah, in terms of standard. I mean, yeah, you can rewatch it now on a HD TV and still feel a little bit like absorbed by the film.
I definitely enjoyed it on my couple of rewatches that I did in preparation for this. So, I mean, I might even watch it again. Just I mean, just because it's a quick watch. I mean, again, it's at 100 and at an hour and 30 minutes, so it's not a
Yeah,
particularly long watch, but it's still it still gives you what you need, right?
yeah,
Gives you what you're looking
exactly.
for out of that movie.
I think that's what a good conclusion to the whole thing. It still gives you what you need, and I think that's what's
Hmm.
important. Yeah. Well, thank you everybody for listening, and this will be all for this session or for this episode of We Had Movies. Keep in mind that we'll have a lot more coming your way, and the music, of course, the intro and the closing is by our friends Nixon Out, who were happy to also introduce their song in our podcast as well, and to the broader public. So hopefully, you guys give it a listen at the end of the show. Have a great night.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah.
Give me that in the city cheer. Double round in my whip, itty bitty, looking pretty chill. Put my shades on, you ain't even seen it yet. Man, I'm so fresh, and you know I'm always spelling cheer. Give me what you want, what you got, cause I never get enough. You ask me how I want it, and you say you want a chance on me. Chances are you don't know how to do this shit respectfully. I say it like it rough, cause I need a man protecting me. I ain't say this shit for later. I said, baby, come and get it. Feels taking over if you let him. I'ma take the paper, I'ma roll it up, and later he might do what he wanted, cause I let him. Give me something that I'm never gonna forget, because baby, I'm the only one you gotta impress. I won't take any more, and I won't take any less. I'm the queen in this, you know I got the finesse. Give me that, give me that, give me that. Give me that feeling. Bring it back, bring it back, bring it back. Like when we were young. Like when we were young. Like when we were young.
Bring it back, yeah, just bring it back. Sitting in the back, yeah, I'm rolling up some Trinidad. Feeling like the bestest, always got the best shits. Come on, round, baby, yeah, you knowin' who the best is. And that's just for the record, so y'all don't get it twisted. I ain't talking tease, even though I'm buzzing, listen. You don't wanna miss it when you get the feeling. It'll make you feel explicit like a new addiction, baby, it'll take a hold. I know you're feeling cold, cause I've been feeling cool. You give me all these feelings that I used to have in school. These butterflies got me feeling light, like I'm floating through the air, hanging out like a satellite. Yeah, it's really got me feeling right. All around me, yeah, looking like a ceiling light. Hanging out with a hella glow. See me from the center of the earth with no telescope.
Give me that.